Woman's Kiwi Voice, live for a discussion around the PM's recent Europe trip. We're using some new streaming software, so it's a new experience. You have to forgive me, I'm sort of still learning. Wait for a few more people to get on as per usual. We haven't got a title for this one. Maybe we should have done that. But at any rate, we're looking to discuss the PM's Europe trip. Hope you're all having an awesome week. Another freezing cold one here in Christchurch. It's although a nice one. Got a few people jumping on now. Thanks everyone for taking the time to tune in. It's been a busy old day in the background on Kiwi Voice today, as we've teed up those two interviews for tomorrow. A lot more in the works as well. We are going to get Garrick Tremaine back on in a different format, probably recorded phone conversation. Scrolling up there, we've got 9 of us on. Let's jump into it though, team. There is a crap load of commentary around this one. We've covered off and provided, and we're going to provide an opinion for you on some of the mainstream media and alt media coverage of what's going on over there. So no more mucking around. G'day, Jim. How are you? First comment up. Thanks for joining us. Alrighty. So Newsroom has reported on Adern attending the NATO summit with a title of Much Ado About NATO as Adern attends summit. So Jacinda heads back overseas again as New Zealand continues to battle economic and social upheaval. We're all feeling that, of course, to attend a NATO summit in Madrid, Spain, and hobnob with the PM of Spain and Emmanuel Macron, the leader of France, to discuss the Christchurch Call initiative as well while she is there. The main focus of the mainstream media, though, has been the fact that she's been invited to speak, and we will cover the actual speech later in this report, so invited to speak at this NATO summit. So this is the first time that a New Zealand leader has been invited to take part in the NATO summit. She's also had an impromptu meeting with Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, coming across him in the main conference hall, straight into full hugs and smiles. Considering Trudeau's record of totalitarianism in recent times, my own opinion, including wide-ranging V mandates, weaponising the National Guard to forcibly remove the trucking protesters while invoking the Emergencies Act for the first time in the country's history since the last World War to freeze the bank accounts of anyone that supported the protesters. Why are we not calling out the actions of this PM? No, we're giving him a hug and having a bilateral on the side offices there at the NATO summit. You can either be concerned about the strength of that relationship or shrug shoulders in complete acceptance. They have a lot of common, in my opinion. New Zealand is not a member of NATO. That's the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, for those that aren't familiar with what NATO actually stands for. There's been so much talk about it in the media recently, but is regarded as a partner. So New Zealand's regarded as a partner, whatever that means. Now, to me, I think it's concerning that we would align ourselves over there at all with all of the words that are coming out of Russia in terms of essentially just inflaming the situation, regardless of whether you think it's right or wrong, what's actually going on there. New Zealand's presence at NATO and aligning ourselves with NATO, any kind of expansion or movement with NATO does sort of draw the ire of Vladimir Putin. So it's probably something we want to stay away from, in my opinion, as an anti-war advocate here on Kiwi Voice. Where was I? Persistence. Yeah, okay. So, but it stays in line, the meeting that is, stays in line with this government's persistence in messaging around the war in Ukraine since it began months ago. Sure as chilly, you're right. I'll just check in a few of the comments here before we continue on. Thanks, Greg, Joe. Appreciate you joining us. Evening, Moana. So, Newsroom reports through National Affairs editor Sam Sakdeva. I hope I've pronounced that right, or Sakdeva. Sakdeva, I apologise, not meaning to pronounce it incorrectly or in a comical fashion. In an article titled Much Ado About NATO as Adern Attends Summit, that some in New Zealand are concerned about Ardern's high profile internationally being used in this instance to bring us closer to war. That's my opinion, whilst others, more so, internationally praise the decision and the wording of a recent address to NATO, which we'll get into. It's quite interesting. A lot of the points, a lot of virtue signaling as you expect, but it's worth getting into. So it was a good balanced article. I'll chuck the links for these articles that I'll reference, of course, in the description for the live stream. Kiwi Voice sees this as yet another example of grandstanding on the international stage, and like a lot of countries during these unprecedented times, believes the majority of the public would much prefer our PM stayed here and worked on our own domestic issues, of which many could be solved from within the country itself. So I think, I'm saying that anecdotally, based on reports, comments on social media, comments in the real world as well, that I think most people will be more keen on having the PM hang around in New Zealand and actually focus on the issues here, because things are getting fairly serious. Evening, Helen from Dunedin. Appreciate you joining us this evening. Now, Nina Obermeyer, the European Union's ambassador to New Zealand, the article says, tells Newsroom the invitation reflects the role Ardern's government has played to date in standing up against the Russia war. So that's one side. While this conflict, she says, has shown us that we really need to stand together if we want to defend the global rules-based order. So in this sense, I think it's really significant. Global rules-based order, I am just not sure about that statement. It's been weaponized a little bit in the US media as of late as well. What is the global rules-based order? I would like to know if there is such a specific document. Former Green Party MP Keith Locke argued that Ardern's NATO visit would compromise New Zealand's non-nuclear status and independent foreign policy. So staying neutral, which we've got a long and strong history of, which has been focused on peacemaking more than war making. Okay, so I agree with a Green Party MP absolutely on that point. He says, our Prime Minister's latest decision to attend the NATO leaders meeting and miss the Commonwealth heads of government meeting in Rwanda shows where her priorities lie. Former Prime Minister David Lange, a champion of the Commonwealth and our nuclear-free policy, might be turning in his grave, Keith Locke wrote in his opinion piece for Newsroom. So strong words, but I agree with him. It just shows where Jacinda Arderns' priorities lie in terms of international relations, both between the Commonwealth and NATO, and also her own domestic policy and NATO. Of particular concern is the way that this article closes off, though, on Newsroom. It says it would be little surprise to see the government announce an additional commitment to Ukraine while Adern is at NATO. But that may be just the start. Now, that super concerns me and probably concerns a lot of you. What additional commitment should we be making, and why would we be making to Ukraine? Obviously, like a lot of countries in the world, our economy is in crisis. I've mentioned it about 3 times already on this live stream. All of our, critical services are at critical points, i.e. health, fire and emergency, all of St. John, all of that stuff. We need the money invested here. We need the focus here, not in Ukraine. Regardless of the atrocities that are going on there and the terrible suffering of the Ukrainian people, which I do not want to diminish, as well as all the victims of war all over the place. We need to be focusing on New Zealand and what's going on here and the things that we control, rather than being in NATO and grandstanding, virtue signaling with additional funds funneled in that direction. You've just got to question it. Now, the speech itself, we'll move on to a Radio New Zealand report of this. They've covered it quite extensively and done a good job, I must admit. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern has used her speech to NATO leaders to push this country's fiercely held independent foreign policy, while also condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine as an affront to the world. This is from Radio New Zealand. And I agree with that also. On military policy, she says, New Zealand is not here to expand our military alliances. We are here to contribute to a world that lessens the need for anyone to call on them, Adern said. So she's trying to put a foot in each camp, essentially put the signal out there. I'll use that term again, virtue signal out there, to show that we stand with Ukraine, that we are good citizens of the global order, but also is wanting to reiterate that we're going to remain neutral, probably to placate us Kiwis in New Zealand. Aotearoa, New Zealand has a fiercely held independent foreign policy. We are also one of the oldest and most stable liberal democracies. Stable over history, perhaps, but do you understand the state of our democracy right now? Is the question that I would be asking Adern. Three Waters, anyone? Environment Canterbury, anyone? Rotorua electoral law, anyone? All of these things in terms of attacks on democracy should potentially be analysed, rather than saying we do have one of the most stable. It's pretty fragile at the moment, as we're all feeling. The speech continued in the vein of puffing out New Zealand's chest and patting ourselves, or herself, on the back for our supposed growing position on the world stage. PM Jacinda Arderns, Radio New Zealand says, went on to remind the NATO leaders of New Zealand's contribution to the war. Hey, look at us, look what we're contributing, including implementing unilateral sanctions against Russia for the first time ever, providing humanitarian assistance, military and non-military aid. The sanctions, as we are learning as time goes on, worldwide are backfiring. The ruble is the strongest currency this year to date in comparison to other currencies around the world. The economy in Russia is absolutely booming. It's not having the desired effect, and yet we still continue to push in that direction. Specifically, America, it is harming its own citizens with its Russia-Ukraine policy. It really is. It's such a shame. Jacinda Arderns goes on to say, our solidarity with Ukraine must be matched by an equal commitment to strengthen international institutions, multilateral forums, and disarmament. So again, foot in every camp possible. New Zealand is a small Pacific island nation of 5 million people. These are my thoughts now. Again, since when have we ever been able to influence large chunks of the world's nations to do anything? Now, I mean, I guess we're open to our voice on the international stage, but as globalism continues its march over the last few decades, I think we should be starting to pull back, as I say, once again, and focusing on ourselves rather than signalling that we're able to help the world in any great manner. Why are we continuing to grandstand? Does our PM really think we have any level of sway to which these comments indicate? Moving on to stuff now and their coverage outside of this. Jacinda Arderns calls for nuclear disarmament, criticises China over human rights during NATO speech. Once again, I will put the links for all of these articles that I'm referencing and commenting on in the description of this live. Outside of this, Jacinda Arderns was calling for nuclear disarmament and has condemned China's willingness to break international norms. Again, from my perspective, that's inflammatory from a tiny speck of a nation going, putting inflammatory comments out there on the world stage at the NATO summit towards China, a nation of 1 billion people and a nuclear superpower. Smart? Don't think so, specifically in these volatile times. She goes on to say, we must stand firm on the rules-based order. There it is again, that term. Call for diplomatic engagement and speak out against human rights abuse at all times, human rights abuses at all times, when and where we see them, she said. What is the rules-based order is what I keep asking. Can you please, anyone out there that's watching this, explain what the rules are in this rules-based order? After the NATO summit and grandstanding speech, the PM and other world leaders attended a banquet-style dinner with all the pomp and ceremony you would expect at the Spanish royal palace. Sickening levels of excess is one way to look at it, or traditional, royal setting. A working visa expansion to 2 years for up to 2,000 Spaniards was also confirmed while in Spain. So up to 2,000 Spaniards a year can now have longer in New Zealand on a working visa. Great. That really makes the trip worthwhile. Sarcasm. The international media has, of course, in the main, lapped this stuff up. Breaking from this mold, though, and was great to see, and it's been reported on by a number of alt media outlets in New Zealand. I think Independent View did a commentary on it. It's great to see such an influential publication such as the New York Times giving a detailed account, although I personally think still potentially just a little generous in its commentary, but it's how New Zealand isn't actually doing that well under Adern, and that some issues continue to grow back home. So it's quite an interesting article. Even David Seymour back here in New Zealand, as reported by News Hub, has backed these efforts to strengthen ties with NATO. Would you believe this is his quote? "We do need to be building connections with friends around the world who can share our values. If you look at the values underpinning NATO, NATO is an organisation for people who believe in free and democratic societies, and while I'm generally a bit critical of Jacinda Arderns, I'm very pleased that New Zealand's Prime Minister has been invited to speak at NATO." So out of touch, I would say, from David Seymour. He is a Libertarian Party, opposition party. Why would you be pleased that they've been invited to such a thing? I just don't agree. I think it's very important for New Zealand's long-term security. Again, if you look at it from a left-wing critical point of view to the attitude of peace and harmony, it's actually the opposite. It's going to put us in the firing line. I can't see how this isn't clearly or more clearly articulated in the mainstream media. That to me just confirms further that if you are a part of a growing section of New Zealand society today that just wants us to remain beautiful, isolated, small Pacific nation with very little influence on the world stage, interest or need to be involved in international and globalist ideals, there is no real political home or alternative for you. That is us here on Kiwi Voice. Thanks, everyone. We'll do a quick scroll through some of these comments here before we cut things off for the evening. Really appreciate everyone taking the time to tune in. China and their clone RMI. Not sure what that is. There has never been New Zealand focus. She's promoting herself as a crime lord against humanity, said Carolyn White. Strong words. I agree with your first part, absolutely. Karen, thank you. Yes, the logo that I've chucked up there for this new live streaming software that I'm using has been designed by one of Kiwi Voice's most loyal followers. Karen, thank you for doing so. Yes, we are in crisis. Absolutely, Helen. Rules-based order and international relations. Oh, you've given me I appreciate that, Karen. I will. Yeah, it's globalism. Yeah, gotcha. That summarises at the end. That's probably the good way to finish off, team. Chuck a comment down below if you're watching this delayed. Share these links around. Keep an eye on the channel tomorrow as we continue down the path of providing the coverage that the mainstream media won't. Thanks, everyone. Once again, I'm getting out of this freezing garage. You may be able to see my breath. Stay safe, stay free and warm, and we'll see you again real soon.